In the gas-lit streets of Victorian London, where fog cloaks secrets and logic battle superstition, Sherlock Holmes faces one of his most perplexing cases yet, a stone that defies gravity, hovering unaided in a reclusive scholar's manner. What begins as a curiosity spirals into a web of theft, murder, and deception, challenging even Holmes' razor-sharp mind. Narrated by the steadfast Dr. John Watson, this tale weaves deduction, danger, and a touch of the impossible, leading to a truth as startling as it is inevitable. Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Invitation. The autumn of 1892 had draped London in a shroud of mist, the kind that seemed to whisper secrets as it curled through Baker Street. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire in our cluttered lodgings at 221B, my medical practice temporarily set aside for a rare evening of repose. Sherlock Holmes, my friend and companion of many extraordinary adventures, lounged in his armchair, his violin resting idly across his lap. His sharp features were softened by the flickering glow, but his eyes, ever restless, betrayed a mind craving a puzzle to unravel. The day had been unremarkable, save for the usual parade of clients with petty grievances, lost heirlooms, unfaithful spouses, and the like. Holmes had dismissed them all with a wave of his hand, his mood teetering between boredom and irritation. Watson, he had remarked earlier, the criminal mind grows duller by the day. Where is the ingenuity, the audacity? I had no answer, only sympathy for his restless intellect. It was then, as the clock struck 9, that a sharp rap at the door broke the evening's languor. Mrs. Hudson, our ever-patient landlady, entered with a silver tray, bearing a single letter, its wax seal embossed with an unfamiliar crest, a serpent coiled around a staff, ancient and arcane. Holmes' eyes gleamed as he snatched it up, his fingers deftly breaking the seal. I leaned forward, curiosity piqued, as he scanned the contents with a speed that never ceased to astonish me. "Curious," he murmured, his voice tinged with the first spark of excitement I'd heard in weeks. "Very curious indeed, Watson. Listen to this." He cleared his throat and read aloud. "Dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, your reputation as a man of unparalleled deductive skill precedes you. I am Dr. Elias Blackwood, archaeologist and collector of antiquities, residing at Blackwood Manor, Sussex. I am in possession of an artifact of extraordinary import, a stone unearthed from a forgotten ruin that defies all known laws of nature by floating unaided in the air. I fear it is coveted by those who would steal it for nefarious ends. I implore you to visit my estate at once to examine this marvel and safeguard it from danger. Time is of the essence. A carriage will await you at Victoria Station tomorrow at dawn. Yours in urgency, Dr. Elias Blackwood." I sat back, my mind grappling with the implications. "A floating stone," I said, incredulous. "Surely this is some parlour trick, Holmes. Gravity is not so easily mocked." Holmes' lips curled into a faint smile, the kind that signalled his mind was already racing ahead. "Parlour trick or not, Watson, the claim is bold, and boldness often masks deeper truths or deeper lies. An archaeologist of Blackwood's repute does not summon me lightly. His name is familiar. I recall a monograph he published on Mesopotamian relics, meticulous if somewhat fanciful. This stone, if genuine, could be a phenomenon or a ruse to draw us into a larger game. He sprang from his chair, his lethargy banished. "Pack your bag, Watson. We depart at dawn." A case that promises to defy the laws of physics is a case worth investigating, if only to expose the mechanism behind the illusion. I hesitated, my practical nature asserting itself. But Holmes, what if it stands dangerous? This talk of thieves and nefarious incest, we know nothing of Blackwood Set's enemies or their motives. Danger, my dear Watson, is the spice of existence, he replied, his eyes alight with that familiar fervour. Besides, I have my revolver, and you your service pistol. We shall be well equipped to face whatever awaits us at Blackwood Manor. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of preparation. Holmes pored over maps of Sussex and rifled through his index of criminal profiles, muttering about smugglers and artifact forgers. I packed a modest valise, ensuring my medical kit was included, for I had learned that Holmes' cases often brought unexpected injuries. As I retired to bed, my mind buzzed with questions. A floating stone. It seemed the stuff of fairy tales, yet Holmes' confidence was infectious. I drifted to sleep, imagining ancient ruins and shadowy figures lurking in the mist. At dawn we boarded the carriage at Victoria Station, a sleek black brougham sent by Blackwood himself. The driver, a taciturn man with a scar across his cheek, spoke little, urging the horses through London's waking streets and into the rolling countryside. Holmes sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his fingers steepled in thought. I knew better than to interrupt. His mind was no doubt constructing theories, discarding impossibilities, and anticipating the scene awaiting us. The journey took us through fog-draped fields and past quaint villages until at last we approached Blackwood Manor. It loomed against the grey sky, a sprawling Gothic pile of ivy-clad stone, its turrets piercing the mist like the spires of some ancient cathedral. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, and a chill ran through me that had little to do with the autumn cold. As we stepped from the carriage, the great oak door creaked open, revealing a figure in a dark frock coat. He was tall, gaunt, with a shock of white hair and eyes that burned with a feverish intensity. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice trembling with urgency. "I am Elias Blackwood. Thank God you've come. The stone, it is unlike anything you have ever seen, and I fear its power has already drawn blood." Holmes' gaze sharpened, his posture that of a hound scenting a trail. "Show us this stone, Dr. Blackwood," he said, "and spare no detail. The truth, however improbable, is what we seek." As we followed him into the shadowed halls of the manor, I felt a prickle of unease. The mystery of the floating stone had begun, and I sensed that it would lead us into dangers we could scarcely imagine. What did you think of Chapter 1? Share your thoughts, and let us know where you're listening from. London, Lahore, or perhaps somewhere as mysterious as Blackwood Manor itself. Subscribe to follow Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson as they unravel this enigma, chapter by chapter, and don't miss the twists to come. Chapter 2. The Arrival at Blackwood Manor. The interior of Blackwood Manor was as imposing as its exterior, a labyrinth of dark wood panels and flickering gas lamps that cast long shadows across the stone floors. The air was thick with the musty scent of old books and polished oak, mingled with a faint, unplaceable odour, something metallic, almost acrid. Elias Blackwood led us through a grand hall adorned with artifacts, clay tablets etched with cuneiform bronze statuettes of forgotten gods, and glass cases holding fragments of pottery that seemed older than time itself. Each step echoed, amplifying the sense of a house holding secrets it was loath to share. Holmes' eyes darted about, cataloguing every detail with that relentless precision I had come to admire. I, meanwhile, struggled to keep pace, my attention divided between Blackwood's nervous demeanour and the oppressive atmosphere of the manor. Our host's hands trembled as he gestured toward a heavy, iron-bound door at the far end of the hall. "This way, gentlemen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The stone is kept in my study under lock and key, or so I thought until recently." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "You suspect tampering, then? Speak plainly, Dr. Blackwood. What precisely has occurred to prompt your summons?" Blackwood hesitated, his gaze flickering to the shadows as if expecting an eavesdropper. "3 nights ago, I found the study door ajar, though I am certain I locked it. The stone was undisturbed, but I sensed a presence. And then, yesterday, I received this." He produced a crumpled note from his pocket, its edges worn, as if handled repeatedly. Holmes took it, his fingers deft as he unfolded the paper. I peered over his shoulder, reading the scrawled words. "The stone is not yours. Return it to the earth, or blood will flow." The handwriting was jagged, almost frantic, penned in black ink that had smudged at the edges. Holmes studied it for a moment before folding it and slipping it into his coat. "Interesting," he murmured. "The paper is common, the ink unremarkable, but the urgency suggests desperation or a calculated attempt to inspire fear. Tell me, Dr. Blackwood, who else resides in this manor?" "My household is small," Blackwood replied, leading us through the door into a spacious study. "My niece Clara, who manages the estate's affairs, my steward, Mr. Gideon Holt, who has served me for 20 years, and 2 servants, Molly and Thomas, both loyal. There is also a groundskeeper, Mr. Finch, who lives in a cottage nearby. None have given me cause for suspicion, yet I cannot shake the feeling that someone close betrays me." The study was a scholar's haven, its walls lined with bookshelves, groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. A massive oak desk stood at the centre, strewn with papers and artifacts, but it was the object at the far end of the room that seized my attention. A pedestal of polished marble, upon which rested a glass dome. Beneath it, impossibly, a rough-hewn stone the size of a man's fist hovered an inch above a velvet cushion. I blinked, certain my eyes deceived me. The stone was unremarkable in appearance, its surface pitted and grey, yet it floated without visible support. No wires, no magnets, no trickery I could discern. I stepped closer, my breath catching, but Holmes' hand on my arm halted me. "Observe, Watson, but do not touch," he said, his voice low. "The simplest illusions are often the most convincing." Blackwood's eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and fear. "You see it, Mr. Holmes. The Stone of Akkar, unearthed from a buried temple in the deserts of Mesopotamia. Its origins are shrouded in legend. Some say it was crafted by priests who harnessed forces beyond our understanding. I have studied it for months, yet I cannot explain its defiance of gravity." Holmes circled the pedestal, his gaze sweeping over every inch of the setup. He crouched low, examining the floor, then stood to inspect the glass dome, his fingers hovering just shy of contact. "Curious," he said, almost to himself. "The dome is sealed, yet there is a faint draught, and this pedestal marble, you say. It feels warmer than it should." He straightened, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Blackwood, when did you last handle the stone itself?" "2 days ago," Blackwood replied. "I wore gloves, as the legends warn of a curse upon those who touch it bare-handed. I placed it back, under the dome, locked the study, and have not opened it since." Holmes nodded, his mind clearly racing. "And this room, has it been altered recently? New furnishings, repairs, anything unusual?" Blackwood frowned. "Only minor maintenance. The chimney was swept last week, and the windows were resealed to keep out the damp. Why do you ask?" Holmes did not answer, instead turning to examine the fireplace, its hearth cold and clean. I watched him, knowing that his questions were never idle. The room felt oppressive now, the floating stone casting a spell of unease. I glanced at Blackwood, whose pallor had grown more pronounced, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting an intruder. "Watson," Holmes said abruptly, "note the rug beneath the pedestal. Its fibers are slightly flattened, as if something heavy rested there recently. Yet the pedestal itself is fixed to the floor. Curious, don't you think?" He knelt, running his fingers along the rug's edge, then stood and faced Blackwood. "I shall need to examine this room further, but first I wish to meet your household. Every member, without exception. Secrets, Dr. Blackwood, have a way of hiding in plain sight." As we followed Blackwood back to the hall, I couldn't shake the image of the floating stone, its impossible levitation a challenge to reason itself. Holmes, I knew, saw not a miracle but a puzzle, one he was determined to solve. But the note's warning echoed in my mind: blood will flow. I gripped the handle of my revolver in my pocket, sensing that the mystery of Blackwood Manor was only beginning to unfold. Chapter 3. The Legend Unveiled. The drawing room of Blackwood Manor was a stark contrast to the austere study, its opulence a testament to Dr. Elias Blackwood's wealth and obsession with the ancient world. Crimson drapes framed tall windows that admitted the weak light of a dreary Sussex afternoon, and a chandelier of wrought iron hung above, its candles casting a warm but flickering glow. A fire roared in the grate, yet the room held a chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Holmes and I settled into high-backed chairs, while Blackwood stood before us, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the hearth, as he prepared to recount the tale of the Stone of Akkar. Holmes leaned forward, his fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on Blackwood with an intensity that could unsettle even the most composed. "Proceed, Dr. Blackwood," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Tell us everything, its discovery, its history, and these legends you speak of. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem." Blackwood nodded, his hands clasped tightly, as if to steady himself. "The Stone of Akkar," he began, "was unearthed 6 months ago in the ruins of a temple near the Euphrates, a site I excavated with a small team of colleagues. The temple belonged to a lost civilization, predating even the Sumerians, known only through fragments of lore. The stone was found in a sealed chamber, resting on a pedestal much like the one in my study. It was floating, gentlemen, just as you saw it. No ropes, no supports, just hovering, as if mocking the laws of nature." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, the memory of the stone sip's impossible levitation still vivid. "And you brought it here?" I asked. "To England, without understanding its mechanism." Blackwood's eyes flashed with a mix of pride and defensiveness. "I am a scientist, Dr. Watson, not a conjurer. I brought it to study it, to unlock its secrets." The chamber contained tablets inscribed with a script we could not fully decipher, but what we translated spoke of the stone as a gift from the gods, imbued with power to defy the earth's pull. The priests who guarded it believed it was cursed, that to touch it with bare hands would bring madness or death. I took precautions, of course, gloves, sealed containers, but I confess, its mystery consumes me. Holmes' expression remained impassive, though I knew his mind was dissecting every word. "These tablets," he said. "Where are they now?" "Locked in my study," Blackwood replied. "I have been transcribing them, but progress is slow. The language is unlike anything known. A precursor to cuneiform, perhaps. I can show you, if you wish." "In due time," Holmes said, waving a hand. "First, the legends. You mentioned a curse. Elaborate." Blackwood paced, his shadow dancing on the wall. "The tablet spoke of a brotherhood, the Order of Akkar, sworn to protect the stone. They believed it held the key to divine knowledge, but at a cost. Those who sought to possess it for personal gain were struck down by madness, by accident, or by the Order's hand. When we excavated the site, we found remains. Skeletons, some with signs of violent death, as if the temple had been attacked. My colleagues dismissed it as ancient tribal conflict, but I wonder if the curse is more than myth." I felt a prickle of unease, though I tried to dismiss it as fancy. "Surely, Dr. Blackwood," I said, "you don't believe in curses, a man of your learning." Blackwood's laugh was hollow. "I believe in evidence, Dr. Watson, but evidence can lead to strange conclusions. 2 of my team died after the excavation, one in a carriage accident, another from a sudden illness. Coincidence, perhaps, but the stone's presence weighs on me. And now, with that note," his voice trailed off, his gaze distant. Holmes leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You suspect this Theodostit still exists, then? Or someone claiming its mantle to frighten you?" "That's possible," Blackwood admitted. "The antiquities trade is rife with greed and vendettas. I have rivals, collectors, scholars who would kill to possess the stone, or perhaps it sets someone closer, someone who knows its value. I trust no one, Mr. Holmes, not even my own household." Holmes rose, his movements deliberate as he crossed to the window, peering out at the fog-shrouded grounds. "Describe the stone sep's properties," he said, without turning, "beyond its levitation. Its weight, its composition, any anomalies." Blackwood hesitated, as if weighing his words. "It's surprisingly light, perhaps a pound, no more. Its surface is rough, like unpolished granite, but it has a faint sheen, almost metallic, under certain light. I've tested it with magnets, heat, even acid. Nothing affects its levitation. It hovers precisely 1 inch above any surface, always returning to that height if disturbed. I've considered every known principle, magnetism, static charge, air currents, but none explain it." Holmes turned, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Fascinating. And you shared this discovery with others, colleagues perhaps, or collectors?" "Only a few," Blackwood said. "My niece Clara knows of it, as does Mr. Holt, my steward. I wrote to Sir Reginald Carver at the British Museum, seeking his expertise, but he dismissed it as a hoax without seeing it. I've kept it secret. Otherwise, the antiquities world is a viper's nest." Holmes nodded, his gaze drifting to the ceiling as if tracing an invisible thread. "One final question, Dr. Blackwood. The note you received, where was it found?" "On my desk," Blackwood said, his voice dropping. "Inside the study, beside the stone steps dome. The door was locked, the windows barred. Whoever left it had access to my sanctum." The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire. I glanced at Holmes, expecting a quip or a deduction, but he merely clasped his hands behind his back, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Dr. Blackwood," he said at last. We shall inspect the study again, but first I wish to observe the stone in situ. Its behavior may tell us more than any legend." As we followed Blackwood back toward the study, I couldn't shake the weight of his words. A stone that floated, a curse that killed, a note slipped into a locked room. These were the threads of a mystery that felt both ancient and immediate. Holmes, I knew, saw only facts, not phantoms, but even I, a man of science, felt the shadow of something inexplicable. The Stone of Akkar was no mere artifact. It was a challenge to reason itself, and I feared what truths we might uncover in its pursuit. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Night. The night at Blackwood Manor was oppressive, the kind of darkness that seemed to press against the windows, swallowing the faint glow of the gas lamps within. After our conversation with Dr. Blackwood, Holmes and I were shown to our rooms, Spartan chambers on the second floor, furnished with heavy oak furniture and drapes that smelled faintly of mildew. Despite the late hour, sleep eluded me, my mind restless with thoughts of the floating stone and the ominous note. Holmes, I knew, was likely still awake, his mind dissecting the day's revelations, but he had dismissed me with a curt, "Rest, Watson. Tomorrow will demand your faculties." I lay in bed, the silence broken only by the distant creak of the manor's ancient timbers and the occasional gust of wind rattling the panes. My service revolver rested on the bedside table, a precaution born of instinct rather than reason. The talk of curses and unseen intruders had stirred an unease in me, though I chided myself for such fancies. I was drifting into an uneasy doze when a sharp sound, a muffled thud, followed by a faint cry, jerked me upright. I seized my revolver and lit the candle by my bed, its flame casting jittery shadows on the walls. The manor was silent again, but the cry had been real, human, and filled with distress. I pulled on my dressing gown and stepped into the corridor, its darkness broken only by a single lamp at the far end. "Holmes!" I called softly, rapping on his door. There was no answer, but the door was ajar, his room empty, his bed untouched. My heart quickened. Holmes was abroad, and trouble was afoot. I moved cautiously down the corridor, guided by the faint glow of my candle. The air was cold, carrying that same metallic tang I had noticed earlier. As I descended the grand staircase, I heard another sound, a scuffle, followed by the unmistakable clink of glass. It came from the direction of Blackwood's study. Gripping my revolver, I hurried forward, my footsteps muffled by the thick rugs. The study door was open, a sliver of light spilling into the hall. I peered inside, my breath catching. The glass dome over the pedestal was shattered, its fragments glittering on the floor. The Stone of Akkar was gone. In the center of the room, sprawled across the rug, lay a figure, a young man in servant's livery, his eyes wide and lifeless, a trickle of blood staining his temple. A heavy candlestick lay beside him, its base smeared with crimson. I knelt to check for a pulse, though I knew it was futile. The man Thomas, the servant Blackwood had mentioned, was dead, his skull fractured by a single brutal blow. I stood, my mind racing. When a shadow moved in the corner of the room, I raised my revolver, my voice sharp. "Show yourself." "Avkal." "It suits me, Watson," came Holmes' sipped calm voice. He stepped into the light, his dressing gown slightly askew, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Lower your weapon. We have work to do." "Holmes!" I exclaimed, relief mingling with exasperation. "Where were you? The stone is gone, and this poor fellow—" "Murdered," Holmes interrupted, crouching beside the body, His fingers brushed the candlestick, then examined the wound with clinical precision. Struck from behind, likely unaware of his attacker. The blow was forceful, delivered with intent to kill. Note the angle, Watson. Our culprit is tall, right-handed, and stood close. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. The stone's absence is no surprise. The theft was the motive, the murder a necessity to silence a witness. I glanced at the shattered dome, but how did they enter? Blackwood swore the door was locked. Holmes moved to the pedestal, his fingers tracing its edge. The lock was picked. See the faint scratches on the keyhole. A skilled hand, but not infallible. And this, he pointed to a faint smudge on the pedestal's base, a powdery residue that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. Chalk, or something like it. Curious. A groan from the doorway startled us. Dr. Blackwood stood there, his face ashen, his nightshirt trembling in the draught. "My God," he whispered, staring at Thomas Sipter body. "The stone, it sits gone. The curse." "Enough of curses," Holmes snapped, his tone sharp. "This is the work of human hands, Dr. Blackwood, not phantoms. When did you last see Thomas alive?" "An hour ago," Blackwood stammered. "He brought me tea before I retired. He was to check the locks and extinguish the lamps. I heard nothing until now." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And the rest of the household? Where are they?" "Clara is in her room, I presume," Blackwood said. "Holt sleeps in the east wing, and Molly in the servant-sacked quarters. Finch, the groundskeeper, rarely enters the house at night." Holmes nodded, his gaze returning to the scene. "Watson, fetch the household. We must account for everyone. Dr. Blackwood, remain here, but touch nothing." He knelt again, examining the floor, his fingers brushing the rug's fibers. "There are footprints, faint, but distinct. 2 sets, one entering, one leaving. The thief was not alone." I hurried to rouse the household, my mind a whirl of questions. The floating stone, now stolen, had left a trail of blood in its wake. Holmes' calm certainty was a comfort, but the shadows of Blackwood Manor seemed to close in around us, whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. As I knocked on Clara's door, I could not shake the feeling that the night's horrors were only the beginning. Chapter 5. Interrogating the household. The drawing-room, once a place of uneasy revelation, now served as an impromptu courtroom, its heavy drapes drawn against the encroaching dawn. Holmes had assembled the household with characteristic efficiency, his commands brooking no delay. Dr. Elias Blackwood sat rigid in an armchair, his face etched with grief and suspicion. Beside him stood his niece, Clara Blackwood, a striking woman in her mid-20s, her auburn hair hastily pinned, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Mr. Gideon Holt, the steward, hovered near the door, his portly frame clad in a rumpled waistcoat, his expression a mask of stoic concern. Molly, the maid, a slight girl with trembling hands, perched on the edge of a settee, while Finch, the groundskeeper, lurked in the shadows, his weathered face inscrutable under a cap pulled low. Thomas's body had been covered with a sheet in the study, awaiting the local constable, whom I had summoned via a hurried telegram. The air was thick with tension, the crackle of the fire, the only sound until Holmes spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pacing slowly before them, his hands clasped behind his back, "a theft has occurred, and a murder has followed. The Stone of Akkar is missing, and Thomas lies dead. One of you, or perhaps more, knows more than you admit. I shall question you each in turn, and I advise candor, lies. In my experience, unravel swiftly. He turned first to Clara Blackwood, his gaze piercing. Miss Blackwood, you manage the estate's affairs. Tell me of your movements this evening. Clara met his eyes steadily, her voice composed despite the pallor of her cheeks. I retired early, Mr. Holmes, around 10. I read in my room until midnight, then slept. I heard nothing until Dr. Watson knocked. The stone, Uncle Elias has spoken of it often, but I've never touched it. As for Thomas, he was a good servant, reliable, if a bit secretive. Holmes' eyebrow arched. Secretive? Elaborate. She hesitated, glancing at her uncle. He received letters, postmarked from London. I once saw him burning one in the kitchen fire. I thought it odd, but it's not my place to pry. Blackwood stirred. Clara, you never mentioned this. It seemed trivial, she replied, her tone sharp. Thomas was loyal. Perhaps family matters. Holmes nodded, filing the detail away, then shifted to Holt. Mr. Holt, your tenure here is long. What of your evening? The steward cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks. I checked the accounts until 11, sir, then retired to my quarters. The east wing is quiet. I heard no disturbances. Thomas, he was a fine lad, but lately distracted. Asked for an advance on his wages last week, said it was for his sister in town. Distracted? How? Holmes pressed. Holt shrugged. Forgetful. Left doors unlocked once or twice. I reprimanded him, but he seemed worried. Holmes's eyes gleamed. And the stone, you knew of its value? Of course, Holt said. Dr. Blackwood confided in me. Priceless, he called it. But I've no interest in such things. I'm a man of ledgers, not legends. Next, Holmes addressed Molly, who twisted her apron in her lap, her voice barely audible. I was in the servants' quarters, sir, mending linens till 10:30. Thomas came in briefly, said good night, then went to check the locks. He seemed normal, though. He asked if I'd seen anyone near the study earlier. I hadn't. Anyone specific? Holmes inquired. No, sir. Just anyone. I thought it strange, but Thomas was always cautious. Finch, the groundskeeper, was last, his gravelly voice laced with defiance. I don't sleep in the house, Mr. Holmes. My cottage is by the gate. I made rounds at dusk, saw nothing amiss, heard a cry around midnight, thought it was an owl, came running when the bell rang. Holmes paused, his gaze sweeping the room. An owl? Convenient. And your knowledge of the stone? Finch snorted. Heard rumors from the staff. Floating rock? Sounds like poppycock. I tend the grounds, not meddle in the doctor's follies. The interrogation's complete. Holmes turned to Blackwood. Dr. Blackwood. You mentioned rivals. Name them. Blackwood leaned forward, his voice weary. Chief among them is Lord Harrington, a collector in London. He bid against me for artifacts, before bitter about losing a Sumerian vase, and Professor Émile Duval, a French archaeologist. We clashed over excavation rights, but neither has visited here. Holmes nodded, then addressed the group. The thief entered the study, undetected, stole the stone, and killed Thomas to silence him. The door was picked, but the killer knew the layout intimately. Watson, your observations. I blinked, caught off guard. The wound was precise, Holmes. The candlestick heavy requires strength, and the residue on the pedestal, perhaps a clue to the stone's mechanism. Indeed, Holmes said, a faint smile crossing his lips. Miss Blackwood, your hands, may I see them? Clara extended them, puzzled. Holmes examined her fingers closely. Ink stains, Recent. You write letters often? Estate correspondence, she said coolly. Halt, Holmes continued. Your boots mud on the soles, fresh from the grounds tonight. Holt flushed. I stepped out for air before bed. The room tensed as Holmes circled back to Finch. Your cap. Mr. Finch fibres on it, matching the study's rug. Care to explain? Finch's eyes widened. I was in the study earlier, delivering firewood. Forgot to mention it. Holmes's expression hardened. Omissions are as telling as lies. We shall reconvene at dawn. Home no one leaves the manor. As the household dispersed, murmuring uneasily, Holmes drew me aside. Suspicions abound, Watson. Clara's secrecy, Holt's distraction, Molly's vagueness, Finch's omission, each a thread, and Thomas's letters, a key perhaps. I nodded, exhaustion warring with intrigue. But the stone, Holmes, how was it floating, and who took it? All in time, he replied, his eyes distant. All the night has revealed much, but the dawn may bring more. Rest if you can. The web tightens. As I retired, the manor's shadows seemed alive with whispers, the murder and theft a puzzle growing ever more complex. Holmes, I knew, would not sleep, his mind a machine grinding toward truth. Chapter 6. The Floating Illusion. Dawn broke over Blackwood Manor with a pallid light that did little to dispel the gloom of the previous night's horrors. The local constable had arrived shortly after sunrise, a stout man named Inspector Graves, whose blustering efficiency masked a keen respect for Holmes' reputation. He had examined the study, taken statements, and arranged for Thomas's body to be removed to the morgue, all while deferring to Holmes with a deference that bordered on awe. "A nasty business, Mr. Holmes," Graves had said, mopping his brow. "Theft and murder under one roof. Any leads?" "Several," Holmes replied cryptically, his eyes fixed on the empty pedestal where the stone had once hovered. "But leads are mere threads until woven into truth. I require solitude in this room, Inspector. Watson will assist me." Graves nodded, ushering the household away to the drawing-room for further questioning. As the door closed behind him, Holmes turned to me, his expression alive with that intellectual fervor I knew so well. "Now, Watson, we dissect the illusion. The stone floated, defied gravity, in this very spot, yet gravity yields not to whimsy. There must be a mechanism, subtle and ingenious." I glanced at the shattered dome, its fragments swept aside, but still glinting on the floor. "But Holmes, we saw it ourselves. No wires, no supports, and Blackwood's tests, magnets, acids, yielded nothing." Holmes' lips curled into a faint smile. "Tests are only as thorough as the tester's imagination. Observe." He knelt beside the pedestal, his magnifying glass in hand, scrutinizing the marble surface. "The base is warm, as I noted yesterday, warmer than the room's ambient temperature, and this residue." He scraped a sample of the powdery substance into a small vial, holding it to the light. "Not chalk, but something finer. Talcum, perhaps? No, it's ferrous. Magnetic particles. Interesting." He stood and paced the room, his gaze sweeping from floor to ceiling. The rug beneath the pedestal. Note how it's slightly depressed, as if compressed over time. Yet the pedestal is bolted to the floorboards. He stamped lightly on the rug, producing a hollow echo. "Ah, a void below. But the manor has no cellar here. Curious." I watched as Holmes methodically examined the walls, tapping panels and peering behind bookshelves. His movements were precise, almost rhythmic, a dance of deduction. "What are you seeking?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "Anomalies, Watson. The laws of physics are immutable. Illusions exploit perception." He paused at the fireplace, its hearth still cold from disuse. "This chimney, swept recently," Blackwood said, "yet no soot on the grate." He inserted his arm into the flue, his fingers probing. "Ha! A draught, stronger than expected. And, yes." He withdrew his hand, coated in a fine dust. "The same residue." My mind raced to connect the dots. A hidden mechanism. But how could it make the stone float? Holmes wiped his hand on a handkerchief, his eyes gleaming. "Consider electromagnetism, Watson. A current induced in the pedestal could create a field, repelling a magnetized stone, but the stone showed no magnetic properties overtly." He crossed to the window, examining the resealed frames. These panes, new caulking, but uneven, and the glass, slightly tinted. No, reflective in a peculiar way. He drew a small compass from his pocket, holding it near the pedestal. The needle quivered, then spun erratically. "Electromagnetic interference. The field is residual, faint now, but present." He pocketed the compass and turned to the ceiling, craning his neck. The chandelier above, iron frame, recently polished. But look at the chains, subtle scoring, as if abraded. I followed his gaze, seeing nothing amiss at first. Abraded by what? By wires, Watson. Fine, nearly invisible wires, perhaps coated in a non-reflective material, suspended from the chandelier, threaded through hidden pulleys, supporting the stone in a web of misdirection. Holmes' voice quickened with excitement. But no wires would be detectable upon close inspection, and Blackwood handled it. He trailed off, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Air currents, a force draft from below, lifting a lightweight stone, but the pedestal is solid." He knelt again, rapping on the marble. "Hollow? No." With a sudden motion he pried at the pedestal's base, revealing a seam I had missed. A false bottom. Inside was a compartment, empty now, but lined with coils of copper wire and a small battery casing. "An electromagnet," I exclaimed, "powered to repel the stone." Holmes nodded. "To precisely. The stone must contain a ferromagnetic core, disguised by its rough exterior. The field lifts it, creating the illusion of levitation. The warmth is from residual current, the residue iron filings from testing. The chimney draft, perhaps a vent for heat dissipation, and the window's reflection to obscure any faint glimmer of wires if used as backup." "But the thief," I said, piecing it together. "They knew the mechanism, or disabled it to steal the stone," Holmes replied. "The dome shattered to access it quickly." Thomas interrupted, paid with his life. He closed the compartment, standing with a satisfied air. The floating stone was no ancient marvel, Watson, but a modern forgery, a hoax engineered for profit or deception. I felt a mix of admiration and disillusionment. Blackwood's legend, the tablets, the curse, all fabricated. "Not necessarily," Holmes said thoughtfully. "Blackwood may be duped himself, or complicit. The stone's origins could be genuine, enhanced by trickery to inflate its value. We must probe deeper." As we exited the study, Inspector Graves approached, his face expectant. "Well, Mr. Holmes, any breakthroughs?" Holmes smiled enigmatically. "The illusion unravels, Inspector. But the true mystery, the thief's identity and motive, remains. Assemble the household once more," I have questions that demand answers. The manor's corridors seemed less foreboding now, the supernatural veil lifted by Holmes' logic. Yet the murder lingered, a stark reminder that human cunning could be as deadly as any curse. The case was far from closed, and I sensed the threads tightening toward a revelation that would shake Blackwood Manor to its foundations. Chapter 7. A Trip to the British Museum. The journey back to London was a sombre affair, the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels doing little to ease the tension that had settled over us like a shroud. Inspector Graves had remained at Blackwood Manor to oversee the investigation in our absence, his assurances of vigilance ringing somewhat hollow against the backdrop of murder and theft. Holmes, ever the enigma, sat opposite me in the compartment, his eyes closed in feigned sleep, though I knew his mind was a whirlwind of deductions and hypotheses. The vial of residue from the pedestal rested in his coat pocket, a tangible link to the unravelling mystery. We had departed Sussex at first light, leaving Dr. Blackwood with strict instructions to seal the study and admit no one until our return. The household, still reeling from the night's events, had been placed under Graves' watchful eye, their alibis scrutinized anew. Clara's ink-stained fingers, Holt's muddy boots, Finch's rug fibres, each a potential clue, yet Holmes had confided little of his suspicions. "Patience, Watson," he had said as we boarded the train, "the manor's secrets will keep. London holds the key to the stone's true nature." Upon arriving at Victoria Station, the familiar bustle of the city enveloped us, cabbies hawking their services, newsboys shouting headlines, the fog-laden air thick with coal smoke and promise. Holmes hailed a hansom, directing the driver to Bloomsbury with a crisp command. "The British Museum, my good man, and make haste." As we rattled through the streets, I ventured a question. "What do you hope to find there, Holmes?" Blackwood mentioned consulting Sir Reginald Carver. Surely he can shed light on the stone's authenticity. Holmes opened his eyes, a spark of amusement in their depths. "Authenticity is but one facet, Watson. Carver is a preeminent authority on Mesopotamian artifacts, but his dismissal of Blackwood's claims intrigues me. Was it skepticism or something more? Moreover, the museum's archives may reveal patterns, similar forgeries, black market trades that illuminate our thief's motives. The British Museum loomed before us, its grand neoclassical facade a bastion of knowledge amid the urban sprawl. We ascended the steps, Holmes' stride purposeful, and entered the echoing halls lined with treasures from antiquity, Egyptian mummies, Greek marbles, Assyrian reliefs that whispered of empires long fallen. A clerk directed us to the Department of Ancient Near East, where Sir Reginald Carver awaited in a cluttered office overflowing with scrolls, statuettes, and dust-laden tomes. Carver was a portly gentleman in his 60s, his spectacles perched on a bulbous nose, his beard streaked with grey. He rose to greet us, his handshake firm, but his eyes wary. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, your telegram was most intriguing. Elias Blackwood's floating stone. I thought it a jest when he wrote, but murder changes the tune. How may I assist?" Holmes settled into a chair, producing the vial of residue. "First, Sir Reginald, examine this, found at the site of the stone's display." Carver peered at the powder through a magnifying lens, his brow furrowing. Iron filings, mixed with a binding agent, perhaps shellac, common in forgeries, to simulate age or enhance magnetic properties, but for a floating stone. "Precisely," Holmes said. "We suspect electromagnetic trickery. Blackwood claims the stone is from a Mesopotamian temple predating Sumer. Your thoughts on its legitimacy? Carver leaned back, steepling his fingers. Blackwood is a capable archaeologist, but prone to sensationalism, the Stone of Akkar. I've heard whispers in academic circles, legends of a levitating relic, but no credible evidence. If genuine, it would rewrite history. More likely a hoax, crafted to fetch a high price on the black market. Antiquities smuggling is rampant. Forgers embed modern mechanisms in ancient facades to dupe collectors. I interjected. Black market dealings, tied to this stone specifically. Carver nodded gravely. Indeed. Last year, a similar artifact, a cursed amulet with hidden compartments for poisons, surfaced in Paris, sold to an unwitting buyer. The forger was traced to a syndicate operating out of Constantinople, with ties to London fences. Lord Harrington, whom Blackwood mentioned as a rival, was implicated in a scandal, bought a fake Babylonian cylinder seal, and Professor Doyle, the Frenchman, has been accused of planting forgeries to discredit competitors. Holmes' eyes narrowed. Duval Blackwood clashed with him over excavation rights. Is he in London? Visiting? Yes, Carver replied, lecturing at the Royal Society tomorrow. As for Harrington, he's a patron here, donates generously, but his collection includes dubious pieces. I've warned him, but greed blinds. Holmes rose, pacing the office. The tablets Blackwood found, describing the stone's curse, could they be forged? Carver chuckled dryly. Easily. Cuneiform is replicable with practice. I'd need to see them, but inconsistencies in script or clay composition would betray a modern hand. We spent the next hour poring over museum archives, Holmes' keen eye spotting patterns in theft reports, artifacts vanishing from private collections, resurfacing altered on the black market. One file detailed a levitating orb from Egypt, revealed as a magnetic trick, stolen from a Cairo museum and sold to a European buyer. The method matches, Holmes murmured. Our thief may be part of a larger ring. As we prepared to leave, Carver offered a final warning. Be cautious, Mr. Holmes. The antiquities underworld is ruthless. If Blackwood's stone is a forgery, its creator won't hesitate to kill to protect the secret. Outside, the afternoon sun pierced the fog as we hailed another cab to Baker Street. I asked. Holmes shook his head. Not yet. We visit Lord Harrington. His grudge against Blackwood may reveal more than museum dust. The cab clattered away, carrying us deeper into London's labyrinth. The floating stone's illusion had cracked, exposing an underbelly of forgery and deceit. Yet the murder of Thomas lingered, a human tragedy amid the artifacts. Holmes, I sensed, was closing in, his mind weaving the threads into a net that would ensnare the guilty. Chapter 8. The suspect's alibi crumbles. The cab wound its way through the labyrinthine streets of Mayfair, the opulent facades of townhouses blurring in the afternoon haze. Lord Harrington's residence was a testament to his status, a grand Georgian edifice with marble steps and wrought iron gates that spoke of old money and acquisitive tastes. As we alighted, Holmes' demeanor was one of focused intensity, his sharp features set in a mask of polite inquiry that I knew concealed a predator's instinct. A butler, impeccably attired, admitted us to a drawing-room adorned with antiquities, Egyptian sarcophagi, Roman busts, and shelves groaning under the weight of clay tablets and golden idols. Lord Harrington himself entered shortly after, a robust man in his 50s, with a florid complexion and a moustache that bristled like a hedge. His eyes, small and shrewd, flicked over us with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he boomed, extending a hand encrusted with rings, "and Dr. Watson, I presume your reputation precedes you. To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Holmes shook his hand briefly, his gaze already roaming the room's treasures. "Lord Harrington, we come on a matter of urgency concerning Dr. Elias Blackwood and his recent acquisition, the Stone of Akkar. You are familiar with it?" Harrington's joviality faltered, a shadow crossing his face as he gestured for us to sit. "Blackwood's folly? I've heard rumors. Yes, a floating stone from some dusty ruin. Sounded like bunkum to me. Why do you ask?" "The stone has been stolen," Holmes said flatly, watching Harrington's reaction, "and a servant murdered in the process. Blackwood named you as a rival, one with a grudge over past dealings." Harrington's face reddened, his fists clenching on the armrests. "A rival, perhaps, but murderer? Preposterous. Blackwood outbid me on that Sumerian vase fair and square, though I suspect he padded his offer with borrowed funds. But theft? I've no need to stoop so low. My collection speaks for itself." I glanced at Holmes, noting the subtle tension in his posture. "Your whereabouts last night, Lord Harrington?" I asked, playing my role as the steady interrogator. Harrington snorted. "In London, dining at my club, the Athenaeum, until midnight. Dozens can vouch for me, including Sir Reginald Carver, whom I believe you've just visited. We discussed a new exhibit over port." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes boring into Harrington's. "Carver mentioned your penchant for dubious acquisitions. A fake Babylonian seal, was it? Perhaps the stone tempted you as a means to recoup losses or to humiliate Blackwood." Harrington rose, his voice rising with him. "Insolence! I've nothing to hide. If you must pry, my secretary can provide names. Now, if that's all—" "It is not," Holmes interrupted, his tone icy. "That Roman bust on your mantel, 3rd century you claim. The patina is uneven, the marble too pristine. A forgery, Lord Harrington, much like others in your collection." Harrington's bluster deflated, his shoulders sagging as he sank back into his chair. "All right, damn you. Some pieces, questionable provenance. But the stone, I swear, I've no hand in its theft. Blackwood's debts are common knowledge. Perhaps he staged it for insurance. Or that Frenchman, Duval, he's in town, nursing a grudge deeper than mine." Holmes nodded, as if expecting this deflection. "Duval, where might we find him?" "The Royal Society," Harrington muttered, "lecturing tomorrow, but he's at the Langham Hotel today. Now, gentlemen, I bid you good day." We departed under the butler's frosty gaze, the cab door scarcely closed before Holmes chuckled softly. "His alibi holds for now, but note his slip, Watson. Blackwood's debts, how would he know unless entangled in the same circles? Harrington is a pawn, perhaps, but Duval, the Frenchman, warrants scrutiny." The Langham Hotel loomed elegant and imposing, its doorman ushering us into a lobby of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Professor Émile Duval was in his suite, the clerk informed us, but upon knocking, the door opened to reveal a dishevelled man in a silk robe, his dark hair tousled, his accent thick with irritation. "Oui, who disturbs me?" "Professor Duval," Holmes said, stepping forward. "Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. We inquire about the Stone of Akkar and Dr. Blackwood." Duval's eyes widened, then narrowed in suspicion. "Blackwood, that charlatan. Enter, but be brief. I have preparations." The suite was cluttered with papers and artifacts, a map of Mesopotamian sites pinned to the wall. Duval poured himself a brandy, offering none to us. The stone Blackwood stole the excavation rights from under my nose. I warned him the site was cursed, but he laughed. Stolen, Holmes replied, and murder committed. Your whereabouts last night? Duval laughed bitterly.
In Sussex? None.
I dined here, with colleagues verifiable. Blackwood's troubles are his own. Perhaps his niece Clara knows more. She's ambitious that one handles his finances, whispers in his ear. I raised an eyebrow. Clara? What do you imply? Duval shrugged. Rumours. Blackwood's health fails. She stands to inherit, and her letters to me, begging for partnership in future digs. Desperate. None. Holmes's expression sharpened. Letters. May we see them? Duval hesitated, then retrieved a bundle from his desk. Holmes scanned them quickly, his fingers tracing the ink, the same stains as on Clara's hands, and this phrasing mirrors the threatening note to Blackwood. Duval paled. Threatening. I know nothing of. A sudden crash from the adjoining room interrupted him, a window shattering. Holmes sprang to the door, flinging it open to reveal a figure in black clambering onto the fire escape. After him, Watson. We dashed into the alley below, the fog swallowing the intruder's form as he fled. Holmes pursued with lithe agility. I closed behind, my revolver drawn. The chase led through twisting lanes, the fog a blinding veil, footsteps echoing off cobblestones. A shot rang out, splintering brick near my head. A narrow escape. The pursuer vanished into the mist, but Holmes halted, kneeling to examine a dropped item, a glove monogrammed with G.H. Gideon Holt. I gasped. Or a plant, Holmes said, pocketing it. Duval's alibi crumbles. He staged the interruption to feign innocence, but the glove points back to the manor. We return to Sussex, Watson. The net draws tight. As we hailed a cab, my heart pounded from the exertion and revelation. Duval's story had unraveled under scrutiny, the chase a desperate bid to silence us. The mystery deepened, the suspects' webs intertwining in a dance of deception. Chapter 9. Hidden Compartments and Clues. The train back to Sussex rattled through the twilight, its mournful whistle cutting through the gathering fog. Holmes sat across from me, his sharp profile illuminated by the dim glow of the compartment's lamp, the monogrammed glove clutched in his hand like a trophy of war. His silence was not one of repose, but of intense calculation, his mind weaving the threads of our London discoveries into the tapestry of Blackwood Manor's mystery. I, too, was restless, the memory of the gunshot in the alley still ringing in my ears, a stark reminder of the stakes we faced. Holmes, I ventured, breaking the silence, that glove, key. It points to Gideon Holt, the steward, but could it be a ruse, as you suggested? Holmes' lips twitched in a faint smile, though his eyes remained fixed on the passing countryside. A ruse, Watson, is as revealing as truth. The glove was dropped deliberately, too convenient, too neatly monogrammed. Either Holt is careless, which I doubt, or someone wishes us to suspect him. Duval's staged interruption and Clara's letters suggest a deeper conspiracy, one rooted in the manor itself. We arrived at Blackwood Manor as dusk settled, the estate looming like a sentinel in the mist. Inspector Graves greeted us at the door, his face haggard from a day of fruitless inquiries. No new leads, Mr. Holmes, he admitted. The household's tight-lipped, and the grounds yield nothing but mud. But I've kept the study sealed, as you ordered. Well done, Inspector, Holmes replied, striding toward the study. "Watson and I shall conduct a more thorough search. Ensure no one enters." The study was as we had left it, save for the absence of Thomas's body, now at the morgue. The shattered dome sparkled in the lamplight, and the pedestal stood bare, a silent witness to the crime. Holmes wasted no time, his magnifying glass in hand, as he resumed his examination of the room with a fervour that bordered on obsession. "First the desk," he said, moving to Blackwood's cluttered workspace. Papers were strewn across it, letters, maps, and sketches of the Stone of Akkar. Holmes sifted through them, his fingers deft and precise, correspondence with dealers, notes on the stone's properties. And this, he held up a ledger, its pages filled with figures in Blackwood's cramped hand. "Debts, Watson. Significant ones. Blackwood's excavations have drained his coffers, and creditors are circling." I frowned, recalling Harrington Sitt's mention of Blackwood Sitt's financial straits. Could he have staged the theft for insurance, as Harrington suggested? Holmes shook his head. "Possible, but unlikely. Blackwood's fear is genuine. His hands tremble, his eyes dart. A man play-acting would overplay his hand. No, he's a victim, or at least believes himself one." He turned to a bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines. "The tablets he mentioned. Where are they?" I joined him, inspecting the shelves. Most held books on archaeology, but one section was curiously sparse, the dust disturbed, as if items had been recently moved. Holmes tapped a panel behind the shelf, producing a hollow thud. "Aha!" With a gentle press, the panel clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were 3 clay tablets, their surfaces etched with intricate cuneiform, and a small vial containing a viscous liquid that shimmered faintly. Holmes lifted a tablet, his magnifying glass hovering over the script. "Old, certainly, but the edges are too clean, possibly retouched. And this..." He uncorked the vial, sniffing cautiously. "Oil, with a metallic undertone, likely used to coat the stone, enhancing its sheen or magnetic properties." I peered at the tablets, my medical curiosity piqued by the vial. Could this be related to the residue we found? The iron filings? "Almost certainly," Holmes said, pocketing the vial. "The filings were part of the levitation trick electromagnetism, as we deduced, but this oil suggests additional tampering, perhaps to conceal the stone's true composition." He replaced the tablet and closed the compartment, then moved to the fireplace, his earlier discovery of the draught fresh in my mind. "The chimney," he murmured, kneeling to inspect the flue. His fingers brushed the interior, emerging coated in more of the fine, ferrous dust. This vent was used not for heat, but to channel air or conceal wiring. The mechanism was sophisticated, Watson, requiring access to the manor's structure. I glanced at the ceiling, recalling his earlier suspicion of the chandelier. The household. Someone must have installed it. Holt, perhaps. He has access to the estate set's maintenance. Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming. Or Finch, with his groundskeeper's tools. Or Clara, overseeing repairs. Even Blackwood himself could be complicit, though his distress argues against it. He stood brushing dust from his hands. The tablets will require expert analysis. Perhaps Carver can confirm their authenticity. But this oil, it's a chemical clue, Watson. A trace of mercury, I suspect used to mimic ancient patina. As we catalogued our findings, a faint creak echoed from the hallway. Holmes' head snapped up, his hand slipping to the pocket where he kept his revolver. "Stay alert," he whispered, moving silently to the door. I followed, my own weapon at the ready, my heart pounding as the creak repeated, a footstep deliberate and cautious. Holmes flung open the door, revealing nothing but the shadowed corridor. Yet a faint breeze carried the scent of tobacco, cheap, acrid, unlike Blackwood Sit's refined blends. "Someone was listening," Holmes said, his voice low, "and they fled when we stirred." We searched the hall, finding only a scuff mark on the floorboards, as if a boot had pivoted hastily. "Finch smokes a pipe," I noted, recalling the groundskeeper Sit's weathered hands. Could it be him? Or another planting evidence? Holmes replied, his tone grim. "The glove? The tobacco, the footsteps, all distractions, yet each points to the manor. Our thief is close, Watson, and growing desperate." As we returned to the study to secure the tablets and vial, I felt the weight of the mystery pressing heavier. The hidden compartment had yielded clues, but also questions about Blackwood's debts, the tablet's authenticity, and the chemical trickery behind the stone. Holmes, I knew, was closing in, his mind a steel trap around the truth, but the unseen eavesdropper and the lingering scent of tobacco warned of dangers yet to come. Chapter 10. The Rival Collector's Motive. The morning air at Blackwood Manor carried a damp chill, the fog clinging to the grounds like a shroud as Holmes and I prepared to confront the next thread in our tangled investigation. The hidden compartment's discoveries, the tablets and the vial of metallic oil, had deepened the mystery, pointing to a sophisticated forgery, but the murder of Thomas and the stone's theft demanded answers beyond mere trickery. Holmes, ever restless, had spent the night poring over Blackwood's ledger, his sharp eyes tracing figures and names with a ferocity that left no doubt of his determination. "Blackwood's debts are extensive," he remarked, as we took breakfast in the manor's austere dining room, the household still under Inspector Graves' watchful guard. Loans from private lenders, unpaid suppliers for his excavations, his obsession with the Stone of Akkar has bankrupted him. Yet there's a pattern, payments to a Mr. V in London, irregular but substantial, a dealer perhaps, or a conspirator. I set down my coffee. Intrigued. Could this Mr. V stay be linked to the black market trade Carver mentioned? Or even Duval? Holmes' lips twitched in approval. "Precisely, Watson. The initials suggest a connection, but we lack evidence. Our next move is to probe Lord Harrington further. His knowledge of Blackwood's debts and his own dubious acquisitions make him a pivot in this affair. But first we return to London. The train journey was swift, the countryside blurring past as Holmes sketched theories in his notebook, his pencil darting with precision. I watched him, marveling at his ability to juggle so many threads: Blackwood's finances, Clara's letters, Holt's muddy boots, Finch's tobacco, and now this shadowy Mr. Ver. The chase through London's alleys lingered in my mind. The monogrammed glove, a taunt that refused to resolve. We arrived at Lord Harrington's Mayfair residence by midday, the butler admitting us with a grudging nod. Harrington was in his study, surrounded by his artifacts, his mood less jovial than before. "Back so soon, Holmes," he said, his mustache twitching with irritation. "I've told you all I know. Blackwood's troubles are his own." Holmes settled into a chair, his gaze unyielding. "Not quite, Lord Harrington. You spoke of Blackwood's debts, a detail you shouldn't know unless privy to his affairs. Who is Sid, Mr. V? Sid, and what is your connection to him?" Harrington Set's face paled, his fingers tightening on a jade statuette. I I don't sit no any fee, Mr. V. Very Blackwood sits financial woes a gossip in collector circles, nothing more. Holmes leaned forward, his voice low and cutting. Gossip does not specify lenders, my lord. You sit dealt with this sea, Mr. V. Sits yourself, haven't set you. Perhaps in acquiring that forged Babylonian seal Carver mentioned, or another artifact, altered to appear ancient. Harrington slammed the statuette down, his composure cracking. You sit no proof. Yes. I sit bought from questionable sources. Who in this game hasn't sit? The antiquities trade is murky, Holmes, but I sit no thief, nor a murderer. Then, tell me of fee, Mr. V. Fees at Holmes. Pressed. A name, a location. Your candor may spare you further scrutiny. Harrington hesitated, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting rescue. Victor, he said at last, his voice barely audible. Victor Marlowe, a dealer in antiquities, operates out of a warehouse in Whitechapel. Discreet, ruthless. Supplies collectors across Europe. Some say he's tied to Constantinople's smuggling rings. Blackwood dealt with him. I know that much. Paid heavily for the Stone of Akkar, or so Marlowe boasted. Holmes' eyes gleamed with triumph. Whitechapel, you say? And Marlowe sits reputation, does it include forgery? Harrington nodded reluctantly. He sits known for enhancing artifacts, embedding mechanisms, falsifying provenance. But he sits untouchable, has men in his employ, dangerous sorts. I felt a chill, recalling the figure in the alley and the gunshot that nearly found its mark. This Marlowe, I said, could he have orchestrated the theft, sent men to Blackwood Manor? Possible, Harrington admitted. He sits not one to dirty his own hands, but his network is vast. If Blackwood crossed him, defaulted on a payment, say, Marlowe wouldn't hesitate to act. Holmes rose, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Thank you, Lord Harrington. You sit being most illuminating. One last question. Have you ever met Professor Duval in person? Harrington frowned. Once, at an auction in Paris. Why? Holmes ignored the question, gesturing for me to follow. To Whitechapel, Watson. Marlowe holds the key to the Stone Sept's origins, and perhaps Thomas Sept's killer. The journey to Whitechapel was a descent into London's underbelly, the streets narrowing into a maze of soot-stained brick and raucous taverns. Marlowe's warehouse was a hulking structure by the docks, its windows boarded, its door guarded by a burly man with a scar across his knuckles. Holmes approached with a disarming smile, spinning a tale of seeking rare artifacts for a wealthy client. The guard, unimpressed, demanded a password. Babylon's Gate, Holmes said smoothly, a guess based on Harrington's mention of the forged seal. To my astonishment, the guard stepped aside, ushering us into a cavernous space filled with crates and shrouded relics. Victor Marlowe awaited us, a wiry man with sharp features and eyes like a hawk. Mr. Holmes, he said, his voice smooth as oil, I sips heard of you. Come for the Akkar stone, have you? Too late, its sips gone, and I sips no part in its loss. Holmes' smile was razor-thin, yet you sold it to Blackwood, enhanced with electromagnetic trickery. Who commissioned the forgery, Marlowe, and who reclaimed it so violently? Marlowe sits composure flickered, but he recovered quickly. Ideal in artifacts, not violence. Blackwood paid for the stone, mechanism and all. If it sits stolen, look to his household, Clara perhaps, or that shifty steward, Holt. The mention of Clara and Holt echoed Harrington's and Duval's suspicions, tightening the web. Holmes pressed further, but Marlowe deflected, his answers slick and evasive. As we left, a shadow moved in the warehouse's depths, a figure watching too fleeting to identify. Back in the cab, Holmes' mood was electric. Marlowe lies, Watson, but his lies point to truth. The stone was his creation, sold to Blackwood for profit. The theft suggests a buyer reneged or a rival, sought to seize it. Clara, Holt, Duval, even Harrington, all are threads leading back to the manor. As we sped toward the station, the spectre of Marlowe's network loomed large. The Stone of Akkar was no ancient relic, but a modern deceit, its theft a spark in a powder keg of greed and betrayal. Holmes, I knew, was closing in, but the danger was palpable, the killer's shadow ever closer. Chapter 11. Watson's Perilous Encounter. The return to Blackwood Manor was cloaked in a twilight so dense it seemed the fog itself conspired to obscure our path. The revelations from Victor Marlowe's warehouse had tightened the noose of suspicion around the manor's household, yet the identity of Thomas's killer and the stone's thief remained elusive. Holmes, as ever, was a study in restless energy, his fingers drumming on the cab's window as we rattled through Sussex's winding lanes. I, however, felt the weight of exhaustion, the day's chase through London's alleys, and the looming threat of Marlowe's network fraying my nerves. "Holmes," I said, breaking the silence, "Marlowe sips deflection to Clara and Holt. Do you believe him, or is he covering his own tracks?" Holmes' eyes glinted in the dim light. "Marlowe is a serpent, Watson, striking only when cornered. His mention of Clara and Holt was too precise, as if to steer us. Yet the glove, the tobacco, the ledger's Mr. Vey, all point back to the manor. We must tread carefully. Our quarry grows desperate. O's." We arrived at the manor to find Inspector Graves pacing the hall, his face etched with frustration. "No progress, Mr. Holmes," he reported. "The household sits on edge, and Finch swears he saw a stranger near the grounds at dusk. Isept doubled the watch, but this place feels cursed." Holmes dismissed the notion with a wave. "Curses are for the credulous, Inspector. Watson, I need you to investigate Finch's claim. Speak to him at his cottage. Observe his demeanor, his surroundings. I shall re-examine the study for overlooked clues." I nodded, though unease gnawed at me. Venturing alone into the foggy grounds felt reckless, but Holmes' confidence was infectious. Arming myself with my revolver and a lantern, I set out for Finch's cottage, a squat stone structure near the estate's gate. The night was thick with mist, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. Each step crunched on the gravel path, the sound swallowed by the fog's oppressive silence. Finch answered my knock, his weathered face wary under the brim of his cap. "Dr. Watson," he grunted, stepping aside. "What brings you out here?" Told Graves all I know. His cottage was sparse, its walls lined with tools and a single shelf of tattered books. A pipe lay on the table, its tobacco matching the acrid scent from the study sept's corridor. "You mentioned a stranger," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Describe him." Finch scratched his beard, his eyes avoiding mine. Tall, cloaked, face hidden, skulking near the hedge at dusk. Thought he was a poacher, but he vanished quick-like. Didn't get a good look. His vagueness raised my suspicions, but before I could press further, a shadow flickered past the window, a swift, deliberate movement. My hand went to my revolver as I moved to the door, lantern raised. "Stay here," I ordered, stepping into the fog. The grounds were a maze of shapes, Trees looming like spectres, a rustle to my left drew my attention, and I swung the lantern, catching a glint of steel, a blade wielded by a figure in black. I dodged as the knife slashed, grazing my coat. "Stop!" I shouted, firing a warning shot into the air. The figure lunged again, a scarf masking their face, but I parried with the lantern, its glass shattering in a spray of sparks. We grappled, my assailant's strength surprising, their breath hot with panic. I landed a blow to their jaw, sending them staggering, but a second figure emerged from the fog, club raised. Before it could strike, a crack of gunfire split the night, and the second figure fell, clutching their leg. Holmes appeared, his revolver smoking, his eyes blazing with fury. "Watson, are you hurt?" he demanded, hauling me to my feet as the first assailant fled into the mist. "Bruised but whole," I gasped, my heart pounding. "Who were they?" Holmes knelt beside the wounded man, pulling back the scarf to reveal a stranger, a hired thug, his face scarred and unfamiliar. "One of Marlowe Sitzt's men, I Sitzt wager," Holmes said, binding the man Sitzt's leg with a handkerchief. "Sent to silence us or to retrieve something left behind." Finch burst from the cottage, his face pale. "I heard shots. What Sitzt's happened?" Holmes' Sitzt's gaze was icy. "You saw no stranger, Finch. You lured Watson here, knowing an ambush awaited. That pipe on your table, freshly smoked, matching the study sets. Speak, or face the gallows." Finch's text defiance crumbled, his shoulders sagging. "I didn't stect kill Thomas. Marlowe Sitz's men, they paid me to watch, to report. Said they stect burn my cottage, if I didn't stect." The stranger was real though, one of theirs, watching the manor. Holmes nodded, handing the wounded man to Graves Cest arriving constables. "Lock him up, Inspector. Finch, you shall answer to me later. Watson, your courage was reckless but invaluable. This attack confirms our thief is desperate and close." As we returned to the manor, my arm throbbing from the scuffle, I marveled at Holmes' timely intervention. The ambush had exposed Finch's complicity, but the true mastermind, Marlowe, Clara, Holt or another, remained in shadow. The Stone of Akkar's theft had drawn blood twice now, and I feared the next strike would be closer still. Chapter 12. Piecing the Puzzle. The morning after the ambush at Finch's cottage brought a brittle calm to Blackwood Manor, the fog lifting to reveal a sky heavy with the threat of rain. The wounded thug, now in Inspector Graves' custody, had revealed little beyond his employment by Victor Marlowe, confirming Holmes' suspicion of a wider criminal network. Finch, shaken by his own complicity, was confined to his cottage under watch, his pipe and vague excuses adding another layer to the mystery. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind a furnace forging connections where others saw only chaos. We gathered in the manor's drawing room, the household assembled once more under Holmes' unrelenting scrutiny. Dr. Blackwood sat hunched, his eyes hollow with grief over Thomas and the stolen stone. Clara stood by the window, her posture rigid, her ink-stained fingers clasped tightly. Gideon Holt fidgeted with his cufflinks, his muddy boots replaced by polished ones that did little to mask his unease. Molly, the maid, hovered near the door, her face pale but composed. Inspector Graves stood by, notebook in hand, his deference to Holmes palpable. Holmes paced before the fireplace, his voice measured but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the Stone of Akkar's theft and Thomas' murder are no longer mysteries of the supernatural but of human greed and cunning. The stone's levitation was a fraud, an electromagnetic trick crafted to deceive. Its theft was planned with intimate knowledge of this manor, and its perpetrator stands among us. Or let us reconstruct the night of the crime. He turned to the pedestal, now brought into the drawing room for demonstration, its hidden compartment exposed. The stone floated via a concealed electromagnet, powered by a battery within this base. Iron filings found here and in the chimney facilitated the illusion. The thief disabled the mechanism, shattered the dome, and fled, but not before Thomas interrupted, paying with his life. Clara Sett's eyes flashed. "You accuse one of us, Mr. Holmes. Thomas was dear to this household. None here would harm him." Holmes' gaze was unyielding. "Yet someone did, Miss Blackwood. Your letters to Professor Duval, stained with the same ink as the threatening note, suggest ambition beyond estate management. Care to explain?" Clara flushed, her voice steady despite the accusation. "I wrote to Duval seeking collaboration on Uncle Sepp's work. Nothing more. The note wasn't Sept mine. I was in my room that night." Holmes nodded, turning to Holt. "Mr. Holt, your boots carried fresh mud the night of the murder, despite claiming to have retired early. And your advance to Thomas for the sister, a sister no one can verify. Were you outside, perhaps meeting Marlowe Sipt's men?" Holt's face reddened, his voice rising. "I told you, I stepped out for air. Thomas Stitt's request was innocent. I trusted him. I Stitt's no killer." Holmes raised a hand, silencing him, then addressed Molly. "You saw Thomas shortly before his death, asking if anyone lingered near the study. Why would he ask, unless he suspected danger?" Molly twisted her apron, her voice trembling. "He was nervous, sir. Kept looking over his shoulder. I thought he was just tired." Holmes paused, producing the monogrammed glove. "This, found in London after an attempt on Dr. Watson Sitt's life, bears your initials, Mr. Holt. Explain." Holt's eyes widened. "That set's not mine. I own no such glove. Someone set's framing me." Blackwood stirred, his voice frail. "Enough, Mr. Holmes. These accusations tear us apart. The stone Sitt's gone. Thomas is dead. Must we suffer more?" Holmes's expression softened, but only slightly. "Suffering ends with truth, Dr. Blackwood. The tablets in your hidden compartment, forged, I suspect, to inflate the stone's value. Your debts to Victor Marlowe, Mr. V, drove you to purchase a fraudulent relic, unaware of its true nature. But someone here knew, someone who orchestrated its theft." He turned to the group, his voice rising. "The thief entered via a picked lock, disabled the electromagnet, and took the stone. Thomas, checking the locks, saw them. The candlestick was at hand, a crime of opportunity. But the footprints, 2 sets, suggest an accomplice. One lingered to ensure silence." I interjected, my mind racing. "The tobacco scent in the corridor. Holmes, Finch Sett's pipe." He admitted to watching for Marlowe Sett's men. Holmes nodded. "Finch played a minor role, paid to observe. But the true culprit is bolder, closer. Miss Blackwood, your letters to Duval mentioned the stone's mechanism, knowledge you claimed not to have. Holt, your financial ledgers show payments to Marlowe disguised as estate expenses. One of you lied to protect the other, or both conspire." Clara gasped. Holt sputtered, but Holmes pressed on. "The red herrings, glove, tobacco, mud, are distractions. The real clue is the oil in the hidden vial used to coat the stone. Its chemical signature matches a compound Marlowe uses in his forgeries, linking him to the manor." Graves stepped forward, his voice eager. Then Marlowe sits our man. No, Holmes said sharply. Marlowe supplied the stone, but the theft was internal. The accomplice ensured Thomas's silence, but the mastermind. He paused, his eyes locking on Clara. Miss Blackwood, your ambition to inherit your correspondence with Duval, did you seek to sell the stone to settle your uncle's debts? Clareton's composure cracked, tears welling. I only wanted to save him. The debts were crushing us. I never touched Thomas. Holmes's gaze softened, but he turned to Holt. And you, sir, your loyalty to Blackwood or to Marlowe? Before Holt could answer, a crash echoed from the hall, a window breaking. Holmes sprang toward the door, revolver drawn, as shouts erupted outside. The net was tightening, but the quarry was slipping free, and the manor's shadows hid more than we yet understood. Chapter 13. The Final Confrontation. The crash of the breaking window sent a jolt through Blackwood Manor, shattering the tense silence of the drawing room. Holmes was already in motion, his revolver gleaming in the lamplight as he darted into the hall, with me close behind, my own weapon drawn. Inspector Graves followed, barking orders to his constables, while the household, Clara, Holt and Molly, remained frozen, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. Dr. Blackwood rose unsteadily, his voice a feeble protest. What now? Hasn't this house suffered enough? The hall was a chaos of shadows, the fog outside seeping through the broken window like a living thing. Glass littered the floor, and a cold draught carried the unmistakable scent of tobacco, Finch's blend, sharp and acrid. Holmes knelt by the window, his magnifying glass sweeping over the shards. Fresh boot prints in the mud outside, he murmured. Heavy, size 10, male, likely our fleeing thief. Watson, with me. We plunged into the fog-shrouded grounds, the lantern's feeble light barely piercing the mist. The constables fanned out, their shouts muffled as they searched the estate. Holmes moved like a bloodhound, following the faint trail of disturbed earth and broken twigs toward the orchard beyond the manor's hedge. My heart pounded, the memory of the previous night's ambush vivid, but Holmes' calm certainty steadied me. A sudden rustle ahead drew us to a clearing, where a figure in a dark cloak stood beside a gnarled apple tree, clutching a burlap sack. The Stone of Akkar, I presumed, was within. Holmes raised his revolver, his voice cutting through the fog. Stand where you are. Drop the sack and show your hands. The figure froze, then turned slowly, revealing Gideon Holt's pale face, his eyes wild with desperation. Holmes, I didn't start him in for this, he stammered, the sack slipping from his grasp. It was Marlowe Sit's plan. Take the stone, settle Blackwood Sit's debts. Thomas saw me. I panicked. I stepped forward, my revolver trained on him. You killed Thomas. Holt. How could you? Holt's shoulders sagged, his voice breaking. It wasn't meant to happen. I only meant to knock him out. Marlowe Sit's men were waiting outside. They took the stone, but I couldn't let it go. I came back tonight to retrieve it. Holmes's gaze was unyielding. And the glove in London? Your attempt to silence us? That was Marlowe Sit's thug, Holt protested. He planted my glove to shift blame. I been Marlowe Sit's pawn. Holmes trapped by Blackwood Sits. He threatened to expose me if I didn't help. Before Holmes could respond, a second figure emerged from the fog. A tall man, scar-faced, wielding a pistol. One of Marlowe Sit's men, no doubt, sent to ensure the Stone Sit's delivery. Enough talk, he growled, aiming at Holmes. Hand it over, or You sipped both dead. I acted on instinct, diving to the side as a shot rang out, the bullet grazing the tree. Holmes fired in return, his aim true, and the man crumpled, clutching his shoulder. The constables rushed in, restraining him as Holt dropped to his knees, sobbing, "I never wanted blood." Holmes retrieved the sack, opening it to reveal the Stone of Akkar, its surface dull in the lantern's glow. "No ancient relic," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "A modern fraud, coated in mercury oil to mimic age, its levitation, a trick of electromagnetism. You killed for this, Holt. A trinket worth only what greed assigns it." Graves approached, his face grim, as he cuffed Holt. "He sit'll hang for this, Mr. Holmes, but the stone, why such lengths?" Holmes handed the stone to Graves. "Greed, Inspector. Marlowe sold it to Blackwood, knowing its value on the black market. Holt, drowning in Blackwood's debts, saw a chance to settle them by stealing it back. Thomas Sett's death was a tragic miscalculation." As we returned to the manor, Clara met us at the door, her face ashen. "Gideon? He did this?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes held a flicker of guilt. I suspected he was hiding something. His ledgers were off, but I never thought." Holmes cut her off gently. "Your silence protected him, Miss Blackwood, but also endangered others. Your letters to Duval, were they truly about collaboration, or did you know of the Stone Sitt's fraud?" Clara Sitt's gaze dropped. "I suspected it wasn't Sitt's ancient. Uncle Sitt's obsession blinded him, but I needed funds to save the estate. Duval offered a partnership, but I never betrayed Uncle." Holmes nodded, his expression softening. "Your loyalty is commendable. If misguided, the truth will spare you further complicity." As Holt was led away, the manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive weight lifting slightly. The stone, now in Graves' custody, was no longer a marvel, but a grim reminder of human folly. Yet I sensed Holmes was not fully satisfied, his mind still turning over some unseen detail, a thread yet to be pulled. Chapter 14. The Twist of Deception. The air in Blackwood Manor seemed lighter as dawn broke, the fog retreating to reveal a pale sun casting long shadows across the grounds. Gideon Holt's confession had unravelled the theft of the Stone of Akkar, and his arrest, along with that of Marlowe's thug, promised justice for Thomas's murder. Yet Holmes' demeanour, as we gathered in the drawing-room with Dr. Blackwood, Clara, and Inspector Graves, was not one of triumph but of quiet intensity. His eyes, sharp and restless, suggested a final piece of the puzzle remained unsolved, a hidden truth lurking beneath the surface of Holt's tearful admission. "Mr. Holmes," Graves began, his notebook open, "Holt Sett's confession ties the case neatly. He stole the stone to settle debts with Victor Marlowe, killed Thomas in a panic, and Marlowe Sett's men tried to clean up the mess. The stone sets back, the culprits caught, what Sett's left to pursue?" Holmes stood by the fireplace, his fingers steepled, his gaze fixed on the recovered Stone of Akkar, now resting on a table under Graves's guard. "Neatness, Inspector, is the enemy of truth." Holmes' story explains much, but not all. The mechanism of the stone's levitation, the threatening note, the tablets in the hidden compartment, these suggest a deeper deception, one orchestrated not by a desperate steward, but by a mind far more cunning. I frowned, my mind racing to catch up. "Holmes, you suspect Holt's confession is incomplete, or that he sits protecting someone?" Holmes' lips curled into a faint smile. "Not protecting, Watson. Misled. Holt believes he acted for Marlowe, but the glove, the tobacco, the precise timing of the theft all point to a puppeteer pulling strings from within this manner. He turned to Clara, whose face paled under his scrutiny. Miss Blackwood, your letters to Professor Duval contain details of the stone's mechanism, details you claimed ignorance of. Yet your ink matched the threatening note. Speak plainly, what was your role? Clara Fitt's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. I told you, Mr. Holmes, I wrote to Duval for collaboration. I suspected the stone was no ancient relic, but I never wrote that note. I swear it. Holmes nodded, his gaze shifting to Dr. Blackwood, who sat hunched, his eyes haunted. Dr. Blackwood, your obsession with the stone blinded you to its fraudulence. But did you suspect the tablets were forged, or that your debts to Marlowe were manipulated to draw you into this scheme? Blackwood Stet's head snapped up, his voice a rasp. Manipulated. I trusted Marlowe. He supplied the stone, vouched for its provenance. The tablets, I believed them genuine. My life's work. Your life's work was exploited. Holmes interrupted, his tone sharp. The tablets, retouched to appear ancient, were crafted to inflate the stone's value. The oil in the hidden vial, laced with mercury, mimicked age. But the true deception lies not in the artifact, but in the motive. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The mastermind is not Holt nor Marlowe, but one who stood to gain everything, Dr. Elias Blackwood himself. A gasp rippled through the room. I stared, incredulous. Holmes, Blackwood, he summoned us, feared for the stone. A performance, Holmes said, his voice like steel. Dr. Blackwood, your debts were real, but your plan was ingenious. You commissioned Marlowe to create the stone, a modern forgery to dazzle collectors and settle your creditors. You staged the theft, using Holt as your unwitting pawn to claim insurance and erase your debts. Thomas's death was unplanned, a complication you pinned on Holt, but the note, the tablets, the hidden compartment, all bear your hand. Blackwood Sit's face contorted, a mix of rage and fear. Preposterous. I am the victim here. My servant dead, my stone stolen. Holmes stepped closer, producing the threatening note. This note, written in your distinctive ink, was placed to sow fear and divert suspicion. The tablets cuneiform, retouched with your tools, betray your scholarship, and the electromagnetic mechanism, your own design, tested in secret, the residue in the chimney a byproduct of your experiments. Clara cried out, Uncle, tell me it's not true. Blackwood's shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. I had no choice. The debts were crushing Clara. Marlowe promised a fortune for the stone. A staged theft, insurance claimed, no one harmed. Holt was to take it, Marlowe's men to sell it abroad. But Thomas saw him. I never meant for murder. Holmes's expression was grim. Your greed killed an innocent man, Dr. Blackwood. You used Holt's loyalty, Marlowe's greed, and even Clara's trust to weave your deception. The stone's levitation was your masterpiece, a magnetized core, suspended by hidden wires and an electromagnetic pulse, disguised as ancient magic. Graves, stunned, moved to cuff Blackwood. You still answer for this, sir. Murder and fraud, a heavy charge. As Blackwood was led away, Clara sank into a chair, sobbing. I placed a hand on her shoulder, my heart heavy. Holmes, I said quietly, how did you know? The details, Watson, he replied, his voice softening. The note sets ink, the tablet sets flaws, Blackwood sets trembling hands, not fear but guilt. His summons to us was his final miscalculation, hoping to validate his tale. But truth, like gravity, cannot be defied. The manor fell silent, the weight of revelation settling over us, the Stone of Akkar. No ancient marvel, but a modern lie, had unraveled a web of greed and betrayal, its cost measured in blood. Chapter 15. Resolution and Reflection. The aftermath of Dr. Elias Blackwood's confession left Blackwood Manor steeped in a somber quiet, the kind that follows the unmasking of a painful truth. The morning sun, struggling through the ever-present Sussex fog, cast a pale glow over the drawing-room, where Holmes and I sat with Clara Blackwood and Inspector Graves. Blackwood had been taken to the local jail, his scholarly demeanour replaced by the broken posture of a man undone by his own ambition. The Stone of Akkar, now in the custody of the authorities, lay exposed as a fraud, a magnetized forgery crafted to deceive, its levitation a clever trick of wires, electromagnets, and mercury-laced oil. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his sharp features softened by the satisfaction of a case resolved. "The human mind, Watson," he said, lighting his pipe with a deliberate slowness, "is capable of extraordinary ingenuity, yet equally extraordinary folly. Blackwood's scheme was masterful in its mechanics, but flawed in its execution. Greed blinds even the most learned." I nodded, my thoughts heavy with the tragedy of Thomas Swift's death and Clara Swift's shattered trust. "Poor Thomas," I said. "An innocent, caught in Blackwood Swift's web, and Holt used as a pawn, believing he served his master Swift's debts." Clara, her eyes still red from tears, spoke softly. "I should have seen it. Mr. Holmes, Uncle Sip's obsession, his secrecy. I thought it was passion for his work. I never imagined he stooped to murder." "Not murder by intent," Holmes corrected, his tone gentle but firm. "Blackwood orchestrated the theft, but Thomas's death was Holt's panicked act. Your uncle's crime was in creating the circumstances, his forged tablets, his deal with Marlowe, his manipulation of loyalties. He summoned me to lend credence to his tale, hoping to secure the insurance payout. A fatal miscalculation." Inspector Graves, scribbling in his notebook, looked up, and Marlowe. "His men attacked Dr. Watson, and he supplied the stone. He sits as guilty as Blackwood." Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes distant. "Ah, Marlowe will face justice, Inspector. His network is crumbling. Your men have his thug, and Harrington's testimony will expose his dealings. The black market trade in antiquities thrives on secrecy. Shine a light and it scatters like roaches. Vis condemnat." I glanced at the stone, its dull surface, a stark contrast to the mystique it once held. "And the Stone of Akkar, what becomes of it?" "A curiosity for the British Museum, perhaps," Holmes replied. "Stripped of its myth, it sits merely a lesson in human avarice. Sir Reginald Carver will relish dissecting its mechanism." Clara rose, her composure returning. "The manor is mine now, but its legacy is tainted. I still sell what I can, settle the debts. Honestly, Uncle Set's work, it meant something once." Holmes inclined his head. "A noble resolve, Miss Blackwood. Truth, however painful, clears the way for redemption." As we prepared to depart, I lingered by the window, gazing at the fog-draped grounds. The case had begun with a marvel, a stone defying gravity, and ended with the stark reality of human greed. Holmes, as ever, had pierced the veil of illusion, his logic a beacon in the murk. Yet I wondered, as I often did, at the cost of such clarity. Blackwood's fall, Clara's grief, Thomas's life, the price of truth was steep. We boarded the train back to London, the manor receding into the mist like a fading dream. Holmes, sensing my mood, clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Cheer up, Watson. The world is full of puzzles, and we sips unraveled one more. There sips nobility in that, is there not?" I smiled, warmed by his rare camaraderie. "Indeed, Holmes, but I still not soon forget that stone, nor the shadows it cast." He chuckled, settling back with his pipe. "Nor should you. Shadows, after all, define the light." Thus concluded the strange case of the Stone of Akkar, a tale of illusion, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Sherlock Holmes, with his unerring logic, had stripped away the myth to reveal the machinations beneath, proving once more that no mystery, however impossible, could withstand his scrutiny. Yet the echoes of Blackwood Manor lingered in my heart, a reminder of the fragile line between genius and folly. As we returned to the familiar chaos of Baker Street, I knew more adventures awaited, each a new challenge to the indomitable spirit of my friend. What did you think of this thrilling conclusion? Where are you listening this tale? London's foggy streets, Karachi's vibrant bustle, or somewhere as enigmatic as Blackwood Manor? Share your thoughts and subscribe to join Holmes and Watson on their next adventure where secrets await in the shadows.